Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining Room for Seconds. And I am so thrilled to have one of my dearest friends in the world, Zack Oates, the founder and CEO of Ovation, joining us today. As you all know, the whole goal of this podcast is to always make sure you guys have something that you can take and make your lives better with and learn and have some inspiration on how to get to the next part and the things you want to do. It is our opportunity and my guest opportunity to make sure we're giving back to you day in and day out. So, Zack, thanks for joining us.
Dude, Greg, always happy to hang with you, man. Recorded or not.
Yeah, we have good times when we hang without the recordings.
Yeah.
So, Zack, obviously, right now you're at Ovation. You guys are growing like there's no tomorrow. Why don't you give everybody just a little bit about what Ovation does and why you're so passionate about what you do?
Yeah. So Ovation is the anti-survey tool. We start with a 2-question survey, and our whole premise is we want your guests to give you feedback in the most frictionless way possible. And then we want you to drive revenue from those guests. And so we promote those happy customers to do things like leave reviews, buy gift cards, place catering orders. And if they didn't have a great experience, then we use our AI to assist you in winning them back. And all the while, we're collecting data from our survey and from Google, Yelp, Facebook, TripAdvisor to pull it all into one place so you can get 34 scores at every location. So it's the same thing as if you asked a long survey, but you're actually driving revenue. So that's the whole premise of Ovation. And the real thing that I love about it, Greg, is that when I see these customers these guests who were previously unhappy and responding, and they get the response from the restaurant, from our AI, the number one word that they respond back with is wow. And we always talk about how do we wow our guests, and especially in this digital age where you're not seeing the whites of their eyes, you don't know how things are, especially because 40, 50, 70% of the guests are dining off prem. And with Ovation, you're able to connect with them in a digital way. And they are so surprised and so happy that you responded to them that here's the crazy thing. An unhappy guest has a 13% likelihood to return rate in a given year. If you respond with our AI, they have a 68% likelihood to return. And all that goes to show is that humans are craving this connection. And that's really what we're about, is we're a connection engine here at Ovation, helping people to feel important and enabling them to give that feedback. And having that connection means that they become lifelong customers. And that's really why I'm really excited about this. And it's a problem that I've seen for years. It's a problem that I experienced working in restaurants. It's a problem that I've seen working with thousands of restaurants since starting Ovation. And it's really awesome and like very fulfilling to see these brands do better and these customers feel that connection with those brands.
So you said something. Why do you start with 2 questions? Why 2? What's the magic number? What's the significance of that?
So we actually did a lot of research. My background is startups, and I mainly focused on consumer products. This is a business product that then the consumers use. But I started with the consumer and I said, okay, how do you want to give feedback to restaurants? And that's how Ovation really began, was with the guest first. And we did a bunch of research, and one of the questions we asked was, how many questions are you willing to answer? And what we found is that there was a drop-off at 3, that there was a whole bunch of people after 3 that stopped responding, that would say no. But interestingly enough, there was also a drop-off at 1. And when we dug into that, it was because at 1 question, people felt like it's not going to be helpful. I'm not going to be able to do anything. At 3, it was like, this feels like a survey. And so we started with a 2, and we found that by just saying, hey, it's a 2-question survey, you're able to get, it's like over 70% more surveys than if you just say, can you take our survey? So it's been, even we found what's more important than an incentive is the duration. So I don't even need to give something out. We actually did surveys. We did a study that because we have, over 50 integrations. And so after somebody places an order, 30 minutes later, they'll get a text message. Hey, Greg, how was everything? Can you answer 2 questions about your experience? We tested that verbiage, and we used to say, hey, Greg, could you answer some questions could you take a survey for your chance to win a $100 gift card? Could you take a short survey to enter to win a $100 gift card? Could you answer a 2-question survey for a $100 gift card? And could you answer a 2-question survey? Of all those iterations, just asking them to answer a 2-question survey got the maximum amount of people to take the survey. Because we're not jerks by nature, right? We may have bad days.
As much as restaurant people think that customers can be on these services and on Yelps and all that, we always think it's the Karens, and the only information that you get is negative. And they're just complaining to complain. And it's hard to realize that most people post stuff because they want you to know and to get better. Most people really don't want free. They love your restaurant enough. They're taking the time to post it. Now there's obviously the others, but I mean, that 2-question part's interesting.
Yeah. And it's been a game changer. And so many people are like, well, why doesn't just like everyone just go to a 2-question survey? It's like, well, because all these other survey platforms are built on a long form survey. You have to have the input of, was your order accurate? At Ovation, we built technology that does all the heavy lifting for the guest. And so basically by getting a little bit of information from a lot of people, we're able to really understand what's actually happening at the restaurants at the individual location level to help people keep a pulse, as opposed to, hey, we got, working with a large brand right now, and they're used to getting 1 survey per week per location. And they're piloting with us. They're getting 50 surveys per week per location. And they're like,
that's
wow.
got to be a little scary though, too. All of a sudden going from 1 to 50, they're probably like, oh God, what did we do?
Well, but here's the thing. Most of those surveys are happy guests. And so what do? We're getting them to do things automatically to, invite them to come back and do things that are going to drive revenue for that location. And for those who are unhappy, we have so many automations in the platform that even though they're getting 50 times more feedback, it's taking them less than a quarter of the time to respond to it, which is pretty crazy.
That's awesome. I tell my team on a regular basis, you have an opportunity very quickly to make something wrong right. And most customers don't tell you something's wrong. Most customers leave and you never know. So you have that one opportunity in that one moment to take a bad experience and make it a great experience. And they always look at me like, well, how do you make a bad experience a great? It's by caring. You got to show the consumer that you just care. And so many in this industry, through COVID and through everything else, and just years of doing it and having workforce struggles and everything else, we don't care like we need to. So the fact that you can get them to start talking to you and give you the good with 2 questions is just something so cool.
And I love that you said that, Greg, because in all the, the theories that I've been reading and all the people that I've been interviewing, as we were talking about right before this, I've had the privilege of interviewing 300 hospitality experts on my podcast. And when I boil down,
he is promoting his own show on my show. God, how can you?
Well, if you want to hear a lesser version of this podcast, as I looked at what is hospitality, how do I define hospitality? And I sat down there at a whiteboard and I started putting together all these things that I've learned. And here's how I defined it, which is very similar to what you said. Hospitality is proving to the guest that you care. And if you are proving to the guest that you care, that is hospitality. That is humanity. Because at the end of the day, the most important human desire is the desire to feel important. And if you can help somebody feel important, feel cared about, man, that feeling sticks with you. And long after that food is forgotten, and you are able to actually have that one-to-one interaction and that connection that turns someone from a casual customer to a raving fan to a lifelong advocate. And that's how you build a generational brand.
Yep. So, I mean, back in the old days, and I always get myself in trouble when I say this, but when you walked into my restaurant, you had to have a blowaway greeting. You had to go over the top. Hey, how are you? Welcome to, back then it was welcome to Jimmy John's. Come on in, let's help. And everybody had to say hello. But we also then did is when they were leaving, it was always a, hey, thanks for coming. We wanted to smack them on the ass one time as they're walking out the door so they felt good. And we use that analogy continually. You want to give them that little, oh, yeah, as they're walking out the door to remember that you generally cared about what they were here. And we were so over the top, people always thought it was fake, but we put it into our DNA that that's how we wanted to treat our customers. We are so thankful in all of my restaurants, and restaurants should be across the board, that somebody walked through your doors. They picked you. You
Mm.
got to be happy. And when they leave, you want to make sure they know how important they are to you. And your service allows them to give you good and bad. And in the turn, helps and prevents them from going to the other sites so you can make a bad good before. And I mean, that is really, really cool.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate industry leaders like yourself who care enough, because otherwise you could build a platform, but if people don't care, then if people don't care about the guest experience and about helping that guest feel that love, then it doesn't work, you know? And so it's great to, it's an honor to be working with brands like yours and with people like you, Greg. And so thanks for being such uh, a great, not just hospitality leader, but a great person who's pushing this industry forward, who's really helping redefine what can hospitality mean, and especially in this day and age where we need to redefine what it means and redefine it, because while the channels have changed, the feelings are the same. And I think that's one of the great things is I tell people all the time, and when I went to your company offsite, we talked about this, which is we don't serve customers. We don't even serve guests. We serve humans who happen to be eating our food. And humans have the same human nature that we have in a relationship we're going to have as we're dining out. And I think oftentimes we look at it as like, oh, this is a DoorDash customer or this is a dine-in guest. And it's like, no, but they're both humans and they both want to feel that love. And so give them an opportunity to talk to you, open it up. And when you reach out your hand, you'll see how many people want to reach back. But what happens though, Greg, right? What happens? You go, you get your food, and then you get this receipt, right? You go shopping, you get this receipt, and then at the bottom of this receipt, what's at the bottom of the receipt? It's like, hey, we really care about your feedback. Please go to this website, type in this 36-digit code, this 4-digit store number, go to the top of your receipt, type in the 18-digit receipt number, and then answer 50 questions to get $1 off your next burger because we really care about your feedback. It's like, I'm sorry, it kind of sounds like you don't care if you want me to do that much work, right? So
So first off,
that's why we do 2 questions.
is that the grocery list for the week?
Oh, actually, this was just a long receipt for our holiday party. We go and we do like Secret Santa stuff, and so we had all of the.
I was going to make a knock on how many kids and how expensive that had to be.
Hey, I'm in Utah. I pretty much have like a dog and a plant. That's what 4 kids is. That's about what it is in New York.
You're just getting started. A
Yeah,
couple more hot
exactly.
tub Sundays, and who knows what's
Who
going to happen.
knows?
All right. So
This
obviously,
podcast is sponsored by Bullfrog's Paws.
obviously, this isn't your first company. So you've done something in your past that you don't spend a lot of time talking about. You actually never talk about it. And I always find that interesting because your first experience or your first act is what makes you great in act 2 and act 3 of your life. And everybody has multiple acts. And so what did you learn from act 1 to make you a better leader today to help you get Ovation to where it needs to go?
That's a great Great question. And, a lot of my prior experience, because I grew up in restaurants and then I got into startups, right? And the startup experience is so interesting. Like, I remember uh, I went to one of my very first investor meetings when I started my very first company. And by the way, I graduated in advertising, moved to New York City, did the agency life for a summer, and I was like, I can't do this. This is not me. And so I was like, well, what do I do
With those
next?
shirts, you couldn't be in an agency?
Oh, yeah. Well, do you know what it was? Is I felt like this big hole in my heart on like I feel like I'm not building value. I feel like it's one big company selling something from another big company, and it just felt like very empty. Didn't feel like I was doing anything like of value in this world. And so, and that was, by the way, just me personally. And so then I went to, I wasn't sure what to do next. And so I took 6 months and I just traveled. I wrote a book. I tried to
And
figure
what
out
was the
like,
name of that book?
so this is actually my first book I wrote, which I haven't published yet. And do you want to know why? I actually haven't talked about this I rarely talk about this book.
This isn't the book we all know about?
No, that was the second.
Oh, do
That actually,
tell.
excuse me, that was the third book I've written. I've only published one of the books. Okay. And the third book I wrote is the book I published. Now, the first book, I have that one on ice. Actually, I have the drafts right behind me in a folder. And here's what that book is called. It's called Why Money Makes You Happy. And here's the reason I wrote that book is because as I took this 6 months to like think about what I want to do next in life, I interviewed a bunch of people that I really respected. And one of the things that I found was that a lot of people were telling me, Zach, being rich isn't going to make you happy. Having money is not going to make you happy. And I'm like, okay, but that's kind of easy for you to say because you have money. And I interviewed other people who didn't have money and they were like, Zach, having money isn't going to make you happy. And I'm like, well, that's easy for you to say. Like, it's your excuse. Of course, you don't have money. So, like, of course, you're going to say you don't need money to be happy. And so I thought, what if I wrote a book about not needing money to be happy before I had money, and then I published it when I have money? And that way, it was written when I had nothing. It was published when I had a lot, and the truth's still the same. So I'm currently in the middle of a 20-year experiment of living the principles of not needing money to be happy. And then, if the day ever comes that hit the lottery, I'll be able to publish the book. Now, I don't know what it means to like be quote unquote rich. I haven't defined that yet, but I feel like at some point, once I've reached the success that I feel is adequate to publish that book, that's what I want to do. So anyway, that was one of the interesting things in my after I graduated college that I did. And I got into startups. I started my first company and I was there, as I was saying, with my first investor. And he goes, so all looks really good. By the way, I started a company that had an algorithm to translate social media data into gift recommendations. And he goes, this is all great. Interested in putting money in. Can you send me over a cap table? And I was like, sure. And I pulled out my pen and I wrote down in my book, what is a cap table? Greg, I knew nothing. And it was such a fun experience. It was a fun ride. We got featured in Mashable. We got great publicity. I was able to sell that company. It was a fun journey. And then I started another company in my MBA. I went back because I got my MBA because I was like, hey, I get this whole startup thing, but like, how do big companies work? And I felt like I didn't have the vision of how a big company could work. So I wanted to get my MBA and see how things happen. And in my MBA, I started another company, and it was called Kai Band. And with that company, we entered a bunch of business competitions. And actually, my claim to fame is at my university, BYU. I have won more money in business competitions than any other student. And so we won like $850,000 in business competition money. And it was that was really fun, and we were able to sell those patents that I created, and then I went in and did consulting, and I did consulting, Greg, because I was like, man, like this startup thing is really hard. And
Yes, it
so I wanted
is.
to do consulting because I'm like, is there an easier route? Like, is there just like a route that would just be like help me still feel fulfilled, but you know, um, but a little bit less stress. Turns out like consulting isn't a lot less stressful. Like every job has stresses to it. And one of the things I learned is that the hardest thing is always the hardest thing. So if you're if you get a stack of papers, it's like the top paper is going to be the top paper, whether or not that stack is low or high. And so what I mean by that is that it's all relative, And so something that's not as stressful, maybe in consulting, because I'm not worried about like necessarily losing my job, but I may be worried about not doing a good job on for my client. And so, boom, that's like the most stressful thing. And so right now, it may be the most stressful thing is like, okay, I got to make sure that everyone, I mean, Ovation's at a good stage where like I don't need to worry about this anymore. But back in the day with Ovation, it was like, am I going to be able to make payroll this month? How do I do that? That's really stressful because people are relying on me. But having that stress as being a consultant was really interesting. And I think through all of that, the thing that I learned, Greg, is, and the thing that I think has helped me to be a better leader is to elevate your ordinary. And what I mean by that is like, what is your worst case scenario? And if you bump that up so it's not so bad, then you're not afraid to take the jumps. You're not afraid to take the risk because you know that your safety net is pretty high. And that's something that I feel like has given me a lot of courage to just go out and try stuff, and seeing that work and seeing it not work, and you know, nothing horrible happened. Like I went out there and I was like, okay, I wonder. I lived in Ukraine for 2 years, and one of the things I saw was a need for some support for victims of domestic violence. And so I came back to the States and I was like, man, but I can't do something like that. And then I'm like, why not? Like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst you could do is a little bit of good. So do it. And we were able to run that organization for 8 years, work with thousands of women and children in Ukraine. And it was such an amazing experience because it was like, I, I never, like, why not? Why not? The worst that could happen is not so bad. And it's like when I started Ovation, it was like, what's the worst that could happen? I lose a few 100,000. It's like, okay, but like that's not like end of the world. Like I'm still gonna feed my family. I still have my awesome wife, and she's not gonna leave me if Ovation is doesn't succeed. And I have my MBA, I have consulting experience. So my worst is let me go get a job somewhere. And, I made some good connections in the MBA. So I think elevating your ordinary to raise up that safety net, I think is the thing that allowed me to take the jumps necessary to get Ovation to where it is today.
I'm Greg Majewski, and I've been a multi-unit operator for 26 years. I know how great it feels owning the right franchise brand, but choosing the right franchisor feels even better. At Craveworthy Brands, our hospitality-driven culture sets us apart because we're invested in your success at every single stage of your journey. We're operators alongside you, paving the way forward to give you a head start on greatness. Start your franchise journey at craveworthybrands.com. So as that is all said and done, and you do that, which is amazing, but you said something so interesting. If you lose, you only go so far. You only go down so far. So why not take the gamble of trying to make yourself better every day? And that's what I think so many people continue to forget in all of our lives and in every aspect is you fail. God made us human, so we can't fail, so we can learn to be better. And we can learn to help and grow every day. We're not perfect, and we're never going to be perfect. and we're all going to make mistakes, and we're all going to have steps backwards where we're in the lows, but you can only go so low,
Mm,
and then you're able to rise and you're able to continue to go. And that mentality of not being afraid of that is what makes you great and what gives your team and you passion, because you have comfort knowing that you can rebuild and you can fix anything, and that's what's so empowering about what we can do every day. And yes, a restaurant's going to fail. Yes, I'm going to let my kids down because I'm not home, or I'm not going to be present all the time, or I'm going to yell because I'm stressed about work. We all make mistakes. And in those mistakes, it's how we learn from them and make ourselves better. And each and every one of us has that in them to get better from and learn from what we do. And you're somebody that motivates people every time you're around them. And that is the most amazing gift that you can ever give. You stated when you're rich, you need to know you've been rich for a long time, dude. I mean, and not in the money sense, which is what's so cool about what that book that you will publish at one point is all about. It's not about money, it's about fulfilling your heart and your mind
yeah.
and giving back to others. And everything you've always done has always done that. And I'm lucky that you're one of my better friends. So, I appreciate everything that you always do. And the fact that you could tell when you were talking that, you generally just care, which is so cool.
Dude, I appreciate that, man. And I think that, one of the great things too about taking that leap is when you fall. I was listening to this George Clooney yesterday, and he was saying, you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures, you know? And Steve Jobs, he talked about how success is a lousy teacher because it makes you think you know what you're doing. And then there's a poem, If by Rudyard Kipling. And he says, if you could meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And so I think that oftentimes in life, we look at success and failure as this um, result of I'm striving for success and I'm fearing failure. But really, like success gives us so little and failure gives us so much. And so but like I said, the more that you elevate, the more that you realize like it's about the people, that 95% of your stress is caused by the 5% of things that are going to bring you joy in life. And that if you look at the 95% of things that bring you joy in life, we spend 5% of our time on those things. And it shouldn't be that way. We need to
Mhm.
reverse that around. And not like we can spend all of our time with our friends and family, but that when we're there, let's be there, right? Let's like care enough to be there and put our phones down a little more. And I think that, especially you and I, we're just like our brains are constantly working. I think things like that, I need to work on that more because it's true that like, all of this is for what, right? And when we lose sight of what it's really for, which is to help this world be a better place, and in my mind, starting at home, then what are we doing it for? Why? And one of my buddies told me one time, I was single and he was married, and I was like, so tell me about like you seem like you have a really good marriage. And he goes, Zach, if I had to clean toilets all day and I got to come home to my family, I would be the happiest man in the world. He's like, because all of my happiness is coming from my family. And I'm like, I hope I have that someday. And to your point, like I was sitting in my hot tub. All my kids were there with my wife, and I took this picture. And I look at that picture and it hit me, Greg. This is one of those moments that I had been like envisioning for years. This was one of those moments that I had like, as I was lonely and single and stressed out, I would look in my mind's
After
eye
a
of
thousand
like
dates.
after 1,000 dates, I'd look in my mind's eye and I'm like, man, one day maybe I could like be with my family in a hot tub. And like, how happy would I be? And it was super cool to have one of these moments of visualizations that like went on my dream board uh, be real, which I think is amazing.
I mean, and that's awesome. And it's because you don't give up and you put people first and you put yourself and your family first. And that's, it's so important. And when you build your company, you put your people first. That's what a great leader does. And you always have that to fall back on that, hey, you're going to do everything to make everyone else successful and better, just like with your kids. You're going to give them everything. And they're going to make mistakes that are going to break your heart. And you're still going to be their biggest fan, standing there supporting them. And that's exactly what you do when you build a company. You're standing there and supporting your team each and every day. And you're going to make those mistakes. And that's completely okay, but you're going to love them every step of the way. And I use that constantly, that it's the same. And people would laugh and kid with us that work's not family. But when you're the one that's putting everything into it, because it's your company and you're the one who will go bankrupt if it fails, you're the one that goes down. It is your family. Your staff and your
Yeah.
employees don't think it that way, and they don't need to. But for us, it is, because it's where we have put everything. And it's no different than how I raise my kids or how I help everything else. It's making sure that each and every person is there, and that you screw up, you're going to support them. You're going to be there for them, and you're going to help them get better. And that's why you continue, and you've had 3 very, very cool acts already. And, and your most important act is now being a dad. And that's going to be the most rewarding of all of it. And in a blink, it will be gone. And you'll be back to going, now what? But it's so cool and so much fun to, be a part of.
Yeah. I just think you have these little moments, right? And the other day I went to get my hair cut, and I like to bring my kids with me just so I could like hang out with them more. And
I don't have that problem.
you know, well, you make bald look good, man. Like, clean shaven, shiny, looks good.
Every 2 weeks to keep it clean.
There we go. And so they give lollipops at the barber. And so I told them, hey, you each could have 1 lollipop. And we got into the car, and they're going, they had 2 lollipops. They got 2. And so I told them, I was like, hey, I told you guys 1 lollipop. Like, did you steal another lollipop? They're like, yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, when we get home, go upstairs, get your $1, and you have to give me $1 and from your allowance or piggy bank, and then I'll go back to the barber and give them the money. So they go in there, they get their dollars, they come back, and after like 2 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go up there and have like a conversation with them about stealing. And I go up to my son, and he's on the rock wall. He's just like, dude, I was like, hey, Marty, can we talk about the lollipop? He's like, no, or I'm playing. I was like, oh, okay, like doesn't care. And I couldn't find my daughter. I was like, where is she? Where is she? And I go into her bedroom, and I see a lump underneath her blanket. And I pull up the blanket, and she's in there crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, I never want to feel this way again. I don't ever want to steal. I'm so sorry, Daddy. And it was just so cool to see, one, the individual nature of all of our kids. And 2, just like that tender moment where I could hug her and be like, you paid. Like, it's okay. Don't do it again, but like, it's all okay. And I think that those moments of like real connection are just so special. And I think that thread of connection, no matter what we're doing in life, from business to employees to family to friends, that is what it means to be human. And it's just super cool to have those moments. And man, I'm trying to hold on super tight. She came down with a flower dress the other day. She's 6 right now. She was wearing a flower dress for a wedding that we're going to this week. And it was an all white little flower dress, looked like a wedding dress. And I just started to cry when I saw her in this dress. I'm like, no, don't ever. And then she comes up, she gives me a kiss. She goes, I won't get married, Dad. I'll live in your basement.
Oh, God. That's awesome. All right, Zach. Well, thank you, everybody. It was an absolute blast to have Zach on. Remember, check us out on all of our social media and everything else, and I will get better at saying that, but follow us on Twitter. Go to cravewworthybrands.com to get the latest episode, and thank you for joining Room for Seconds.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Hey viewers, thanks again for supporting Room for Seconds. If you found this episode inspiring, interesting, or any bit informative, please hit that little subscribe button down at the bottom so you never miss an episode. In my 26 years in this amazing industry, I've been blessed with incredible mentorship. This show is my way of giving back. Follow me on LinkedIn, search Greg Majewski, on Twitter, @Greg_Majewski. If you still have room for more, visit our website at media.craveworthybrands.com. You'll find more videos, shows, notes, blogs, resources, and an easy way to get in touch with the Craveworthy Brands team. I'm your host, Greg Majewski. Thanks again for tuning in to Room for Seconds.